There's one word that would describe Jimmy, and everybody that has called me during this time uses that word, and the word is humble. Jimmy was a very sweet, humble person.
Hey fam, a few months ago, I was thinking about my childhood, and I started thinking about maybe doing a video series of kind of how we grew up as Langfords and whatnot, and how we had such good times at Nanny and Papa's house during the summer and spring, and just how much Tanya and I for sure just loved going there and hanging out with them, and it was just so much fun. Well, a huge part of that was Uncle Jim, and every morning, Monday through Friday, um, he would drive up in his pickup truck to drop Kyle off so that we could play and cause some ruckus and get into trouble and whatever else we were doing as kids. And hey, James, by the way, I've got some good stories about your dad, so I'll talk to you later. Anyway, I can't recall one time, though, that Uncle Jim would not give me a hug or just say something encouraging, you know? He never left without saying, "I love you, boy," and just giving you just a big bear hug. He was a big, strong guy. And so he gave really good hugs, and I miss him. And I miss his encouragement. So what I wanted to do with this video is there's some family members that want to pay tribute to Uncle Jim and tell some memories and funny stories. And I also have another story at the end of the video that I want to share that is, to me, is Uncle Jim. So I hope this video will help you in the grieving process, and I hope you enjoy it.
We're here today at Nan and Papa's house, remembering Uncle Jim and telling stories about him. So we got Uncle Kevin, Becca and Irby, Maddox, Dixon, Lexi, Uncle Jay, Nan and Papa, and we're about to hear some stories about Uncle Jim.
Okay, this is mostly for Allie, Anna Claire, and James, because I'm sitting here happily looking at my grandchildren, and I'm about to tell them some stories about your grandfather. We love telling stories about our grandchildren. In my family, there were 5 children. Nanny and Papa had Larry, Jean, and Pat, and they were 2 years apart. My brother Larry is now 80 years old, and I'm almost 70. Then 6.5 years after those 3, after Pat was born, I was born. I was born in 1950, July 30th. Almost exactly 2 years later, Jimmy was born, July 16th, 1952. I learned from my older siblings how to be a really good big sister because they were very good siblings to me. They spoiled me, and I admit that, and I loved it.
Amen.
By nature, I'm a teacher nurturer. So early on, I assumed the role of taking care of my baby brother, and I loved taking care of him. We had a really good relationship. We didn't fuss and fight. I never remember really fussing with him because I could get him to do whatever I wanted him to do. My very earliest memory is before we started to school. He was probably 2 and I was 4. And Nanny started to work, so we had to have somebody to take care of us. Where we lived, across the road, there were 2 black families. And we actually stayed with one of the black women. Her name was May Hattie. So May Hattie kept Jimmy and me while my mama worked. And 2 things I remember about our entertainment. We would sit on her kitchen floor, and she'd give us a Sears Roebuck catalog. You probably don't even know what that is, but it's a big, thick catalog, and it would have lots of pictures in it and lots of toys. Jimmy always liked looking at the tools and that kind of thing. I liked looking at the clothes, and then at Christmas we'd look at the toys. And then she would give us just some spools where she had empty spools of thread that had emptied off. And Jimmy was the builder because he was always doing things with his hands. So he would make cars or trucks or something like that we could roll and play with. The next memory that I've been thinking about, he was in 1st grade, I was in 3rd grade. We're going to have pictures made the next day, and I remember the night before. Brenda, teach me how to smile. I just don't know how to smile. Just teach me how to smile so that I'll look good in the picture. Well, all I could think about on the day that I got the news that he was in heaven is that he has a lot to smile about now. And he's got a big smile on his face. And he always had a big smile on his face when he was talking about Allie, Anna Claire, and James, or Kyle. You know, there was nobody that could take the place of his family. In 5th grade, I started taking piano lessons. Well, who do you think wanted to take piano lessons? Jimmy, and he did. I remember our first recital, and right before school was out. Don't remember exactly the title of his song. Mine was something about cotton picking. I remember that. And his was an Indian song where it sounded like Indian drums. I don't think he played piano next year, but he did continue in music. He played the cymbals in high school in the band. So he kept his musical talent going, whether he would let anybody know about it or not. Also, that same summer that I was in 5th grade and he was in 3rd grade, I got the mumps. And I had a big case of mumps. I was really swollen. I don't know if I was getting so much attention or what, but Jimmy wanted to get the mumps. And so I remember lying in bed and not able to talk, not able to move really. And he snuggled up as close as he could get to me so he could get the mumps. Then our mama came in and she stopped all that. She got him out of the bed. So, and I really don't remember if he got the mumps or not, but if he didn't, it was not because he didn't try. And there's other stories I could share, and I'm sure other stories that I will think about, and as I do, I'll write them down. But just a few more. We continued a good relationship all of our life. It was just a sweet experience to have him as a brother, and I think he would say that about me too. When Carrie and I met and he was coming to visit us for the first time, we didn't have cell phones, that kind of thing. And so we had arranged to meet at a gas station near my home so that I could then take him, because we lived way out in the country, take him to our house instead of trying to explain where we lived. Well, Jimmy went with me. He was the first one in my family to meet Carrie. And of course, he loved him from the beginning. After Jimmy started playing football, he hurt his knee really badly one year, and he was on crutches, and we went to North Carolina that year to visit Carrie's family, and I remember he walked all the way. You all have been to Grandfather Mountain. He walked the trail all around Grandfather Mountain, up the steep cliffs and everything, on those crutches with Mama right beside him, keeping up with him. We've talked about that just recently, how he did that. It was amazing. And then when Carrie was in Vietnam and I went back to live with Nanny and Papa, Kevin was 3 months old when Carrie had to leave to go to Vietnam, and Jimmy, like Nanny and Papa, took care of Kevin, played with Kevin. I mean, Kevin ruled the roost. Whatever he wanted, he got. So Jimmy was a part of spoiling Kevin. We just had the greatest time telling grandchildren stories and talking about our family. There's not a sweeter person, a kinder, more gentle person that ever lived. You have a great legacy, Kyle and Allie, Anna Claire, James, Addie, and Kay. You know how much I love you and appreciate you. You took over the job of taking care of Jimmy, and you did it better than I did, but I will always thank you and love you for how you took care of him, and there always, always will be a special place in the heart of all of our family for Jimmy and all of your family, Kay. We love you.
Okay, we got one more story Nan thought of, so she's going to add another one.
Okay, so I've been telling my grandchildren a few more stories about when I grew up, and I happen to think of this one. I only remember my mama switching my legs one time. She never spanked me, but she switched my legs one time, and I think it all had to do with Jimmy. My favorite thing to play was Playhouse, and I would make me a good playhouse and have it pretty. Well, one day I decided to cook for Jimmy, so I was making mud pies, and he was helping me make mud pies, and we got muddy. I mean, we really got muddy. We were knee-deep in mud, and she looked out the kitchen window and saw us out there in all that mud, and she came out with a switch, and she switched our legs, and that ended making mud pies. Okay, another story. As we've sat here talking, I thought of another one. Jimmy was more likely to get in a little bit of mischief. I guess that's why I wanted to take care of him, to help him avoid that. But my daddy smoked, and he did quit smoking later in life, but it was a little bit too late. He got lung cancer from his smoking. But one day, Jimmy decided he would try smoking, and Papa caught him. And, well, Papa saw him, let me say it that way. He didn't catch him, because Jimmy ran and got under the house. It was the kind of house where a little person could crawl up under. And he stayed there. He did not come out. No coaxing, no threatening would bring him out, because he didn't want to face reality. I don't really remember what happened. We had to pause a minute because there's a noise. We're outside, but anyway, I'm not sure the outcome of this smoking story. I know Jimmy had to come out from under the house by nighttime, and I imagine he got his spanking like he knew that he would. Okay, a fishing story. Jimmy loved fishing. He loved being outdoors. Everybody knows that, but he loved fishing, and he was able to continue fishing up and, well, just, I know, until just very recently. And I talked with him 3 different times in March, and one time he told me that he'd been fishing that day, and he caught a lot of fish. I know that he took some to Kyle's, and they cooked them there, and he said, I sure do wish you'd bring Maddox. I know he likes fishing, and let him fish with me. And he loved telling me stories about taking James fishing. And one time, he was a little bit hesitant to tell me. He said, but James caught more than I did today. James is a better fisherman than I am. So James, you outdid your grandpa. Good for you.
Hey, this is Kevin, and I just have one story that I feel kind of bad about because it's more about me in some ways than it is Uncle Jim. But the last summer that I played organized baseball after I graduated from high school was over in Albany, Georgia. And he had come over with Kyle and to watch me play. And I think I remember laying down a sacrifice bunt and then a bunt for a base hit. But then finally my coach let me swing away, and I hit a ball that game off the 385 foot sign. didn't quite go over the fence. I'd hit a few home runs over the fence, but that was the longest baseball I'd ever hit in my life, and he was there to witness that day. And just like he supports you, James, and was at a lot of your games, and I'm sure you and Kyle both have plenty of stories of heroic type moments where he watched you play. That is a memory that I have. And I just want to say to all of you that I have been heartbroken over Uncle Jim's passing. And I am sorry and grieving with you. Still grieving with you. But I look forward to keeping up with you all the more in the days to come. And I want to share this verse with you from 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. It says, regarding the question that has come up about what happens to those already dead and buried, we don't want to be in the dark any longer. First off, we must not carry on over them like people who have nothing to look forward to, as if the grave were the last word. Since Jesus died and broke loose from the grave, God will most certainly bring back to life those who died in Jesus. So grieve, and grieve hard, but grieve with hope, knowing that you will see him again and that he will rise again to be with the Lord. His spirit is already with the Lord. But just know that I am sad and sorry with you. Aunt Kay, I love you. And all Kyle's family, I love you.
Kay, Kyle, Addie, Allie, Anna Claire, and James. Brenda told you about the first time I saw Jimmy. He drove her to the intersection of Interstate 75 and Highway 27 to meet me. We had met in college. I lived in Tennessee. I lived in North Carolina. I'd been to Alma. You know where Alma's at. I'd been to Alma to visit my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Granny Miles. And that's what I told my parents, the only reason I wanted to go to Georgia. If I really wanted to go see Brenda, so on the way back from seeing my grandmother, I was going to stop to see Brenda. And we met at this intersection, and Jimmy drove her there. I guess I might initially thought he was there to check me out and make sure that it was okay for his big sister to go with me. I guess my next memory is while Brenda and I were dating, and he played high school football. He was a defensive tackle and an offensive tackle. He played both ways. And on defense, at least a couple games I saw, he was a leading tackler. He was quite a football player. And then the thing I'd like to leave with you, is we still okay on the time, Tracy? I need to. When we talked on the phone for many years, or we would see him, when we were getting ready to leave or end a phone conversation, he would say, "Kerry, I'm so proud, so thankful, so blessed that you're my brother-in-law." And I would tell him it was mutual. That's how I felt about him. But that's a character trait of Jimmy. He always let you know he loved you. He had a sweet spirit, kind, gentle. I've met a lot of people in my lifetime, never met anybody with the sweet spirit, the gentleness, and the love that Jimmy had. He was a great encourager, and I hope that legacy will continue in your lives. I'll think of one more story, and Brenda has never let me forget it. I think it was my junior year in college. I lived in North Carolina, was a North Carolina Tar Heel fan, and that year in the Peach Bowl, North Carolina was playing Arizona State. And I went to see Brenda during the Christmas holidays, and Jimmy and I were going to the game. A friend at college had given me tickets, so I had free tickets to the game, the bowl game, the Peach Bowl. And on the way from Vienna to Atlanta, we stopped in Macon and dropped Brenda off at Gene's house. That was their brother. And he always kidded me that he watched the game in his recliner and had a great time
Because it snowed.
because when Jimmy and I went to the game, it was kind of cold for Georgia, and it was one of those rare occasions when it snowed and sleeted, and it was nasty. Plus, North Carolina lost the football game. On the way home, and I was driving a '68 Mustang, and I'd had it for a couple years, and I knew that I was getting low on gas, and Brenda's we've soon be married 50 years, she's never let me forget this, because I think it's the only time it ever happened. But anyway, we were like 100 yards from the exit to Gene's house, and there was a gas station there. Well, at that point, 100 yards from the exit, we ran out of gas. And typical Jimmy, servant's heart, he said, Kerry, you stay in the car, make sure nothing happens to it, that somebody doesn't come along and do something to it or it gets towed, and I'll walk and get some gas. And he did. He got a gas can and brought it back, and we put it in the car and drove on up to the station and filled it up and went to Gene's house to get Brendan. So they really kidded us about being cold and miserable and watching the football game when they were warm and cozy and watching it on TV, and also about running out of gas, because I am the kind of person that I usually don't let the car get below a half a tank. I keep it full or almost full. But I ran out of gas, but Jimmy took care of us, and again, that's Jimmy, the servant.
He was too much in love to be thinking clearly. That was 1969 before
Yes,
we got
married
married.
in 70,
You
yeah.
were a senior, and I don't think you'd had your car quite 2 years if it was a 68. But anyway, I'm the only one who would pick up on those details. There's one word that would describe Jimmy, and everybody that has called me during this time uses that word, and the word is humble. Jimmy was a very sweet, humble person, and if I picked a person in the Bible to depict him, it would be Moses. Numbers 12:3 says, "Now the man Moses was very humble, more than all men who were on the face of the earth." And you know the story of Moses. Moses felt like he could not talk. And we don't know if he actually had a speech impediment or not, but he told the Lord, "I can't talk." And the Lord said, "Then I'll get your brother Aaron to speak for you." And that's kind of how it was with Jimmy and me. You know that Jimmy stuttered. And early on, he was slow in even trying to talk. And then he stuttered. And that bothered him. But that's who he was. And I became his voice. So even when he was little, and maybe that's why he didn't try talking more, when he would try to want to say something, I'd just kind of step in there and do it for him. And so I really just felt very responsible for taking care of him and loving him and nurturing him. Then I started to school first, of course. And I'm not really sure what he did while I was at school. I never thought about that until now. But when he started, and in first grade, the teacher recognized that he probably needed to go to speech, so we had a speech teacher. But he wouldn't go without me. And I'm not sure, maybe I had a speech problem too, and maybe I needed it as much as he did, but together we went to speech class.
Hey, Aunt Kay and Kyle and Addie and Allie and Anna Claire and James. I think we're about to wrap up our story time, but we've enjoyed sitting out here at Nan and Papa's telling stories about Uncle Jim and reminiscing. We even told the story about Kyle driving Papa to the airport in Atlanta and got a good laugh out of that. But we've enjoyed hearing Nan tell stories about Uncle Jim and just reminiscing about him and how much we loved him and how much we're going to miss him. But we just want y'all to know we love you, and we'll be praying for you, and wish we could be there with you to give you a hug, but we're there with you in spirit, and hope you enjoy these stories that we've made today while we're thinking about y'all. We love you.
Today, I would like to pay tribute to my little brother, Jimmy LaRue Langford. I have never known a kinder, gentler, and caring person than my brother. To begin with, I would like to share with you a miraculous recovery. I don't remember all the details about this, but what I do remember, I'm telling you now. We were living in the old Taylor house out from Pinehurst, and Jimmy was about 4 or 5 years old, and he got very, very sick. Dr. Joe Christmas was a local doctor, and he made house calls to come out to see Jimmy and to give him some medications. He was so seriously ill that he could not walk or even talk. He was pretty much bedridden. Actually, he was paralyzed. What we found out later, we were so scared and afraid that he would die. Come to find out, he had polio. He had never received his inoculations for polio, and this was a very frightening thing to all of us. We were all afraid and scared that he was going to die. The doctor came out, as I said, and doctored him several times over the next few weeks. And he seemed to have gotten worse. And Mom and Daddy, they called for a laying on of hands prayer service for Jimmy. The ministers that I remember were Dr. Moore, Brother Moore, Howard Fairclough, Marvin Hartsfield, and Bill Amerson. I don't remember which one of them actually came out and conducted the service, but I do remember that not long after this prayer service, Jimmy began to show some improvement. Still couldn't walk nor talk. As I said, he was pretty much paralyzed. And then we had a physical therapist to come out and work with him and to try to get him to walking and everything. And he did begin to show signs of improvement. And the therapist showed us how to continue working with him, which we did. Jimmy continued to get better as the days and weeks went by. And we were so glad. We were so happy that our little brother was going to be okay. However, his speech was impaired. He found it very difficult to form and say words. And with the help of a speech therapist, over the next few weeks, his speech began to improve. However, he did continue to have a speech impairment. But you know, he never let this define who he was. It was something that he just had to accept and live with. As I see it now, it was a cross he had to bear for the rest of his life. Now, Jimmy and Brenda were like a second family for Mom and Daddy. The other three of us were much older. That is Jean and Patsy and myself. I was the oldest, then Jean and Patsy. We took on the role of caregivers. Daddy was working hard in the fields from sun up to sundown. Mama later took a sewing job at Montezuma. And so it was pretty much left up to us three kids to take up the slack of home life and care. There were times I think Jimmy and Brenda both thought we were their parents because we basically took care of them. Jimmy was my shadow. Everywhere I went or what I did, he was right beside me. After I got my first job at Bluebird School Bus Company in Fort Valley, Georgia, I was making my own money in my own way. And Jimmy and Brenda would always ask me, "What can I do for you?" They wanted to do something for me because they knew if they did, I would give them $1 or $2. And so I would tell them something like, well, shine my shoes, iron my shirt, or massage my back. And they were glad to do it because they would get $1 or $2. But what they didn't know is that I would have given it to them anyway, but they wanted to earn it. And so that was good for them. Now, another thing that happened in the summer of 1964, I was in the Air Force, stationed at Carswell Air Force Base, Fort Worth, Texas. I had just finished 2 years there and had received PCS orders to go to Spain. And they came out to pick me up. Now, they included Mom and Daddy, Gene. He had a 1963 Galaxy Ford, and Brenda and Jimmy. So they all drove out to Fort Worth, Texas to pick me up and bring me back home. Well, while we were there, we did spend a few days with the Denny family. And after that, we drove back to Georgia. It was about a 15 to 16-hour drive, and we drove straight through. Just, pit stops here and there. Jimmy was so tired and restless that he just couldn't sleep sitting up in the seat there. So he decided to get down in the back floorboard and stretch out and sleep, in which he did, and made it fine. Now, as I said earlier, I have never known a kinder, gentler, caring person than Jimmy was. He had a positive attitude and always looked on the bright side of life. When I would call him, and he would call me too, he would always say, "Well, I'm fine. I'm doing okay." Though I knew deep down in my heart that he was in a lot of pain, or has been in a lot of pain from his surgeries over the last few years. But he was not one to complain. He would just say, "Just something I have to bear, live with." He never failed to tell me at the end of our conversations, and whenever we were together, that, "Larry, I love you, I appreciate you and love you." And I would say to him, "Jimmy, I appreciate you and love you too, because you're my little brother." God bless one and all.
So after watching Dad's video, which was an amazing story, I had one question for him. So here it is.
Jamie asked me the other day if there was a story behind Jimmy getting his middle name. And I said, yes, there is. And this is it. A few days before he was born, I had gone to the movie theater in Vienna to see one of my favorite characters. His name was LaRue. It was an old Western. He was a cowboy. He also used the whip and was very good at it. And he battled the bad men with it. When I got back home, Mama was asking me what was the movie and what it was about, and I was telling her. And I said it was about LaRue, the man with the whip. And she said, that sounds pretty good, LaRue. I kind of like that. And what do you know? Jimmy got his middle name, LaRue.
Okay, so one of my favorite memories of Uncle Jim involved the one and only Kyle Langford. Now, if you know anything about Kyle growing up, he was a very curious and mischievous kid. And it's because of this that the phrase Kyle son was born. Now, there are two kinds of Kyle sons. The first one is, "Hey, Kyle son, how was your day?" The second one was, "Kyle son." Whenever he said that, we knew, Tanya and I knew, that Uncle Jim had found out what we'd been doing all day, and Kyle was taking the brunt of the punishment. So, I mean, that was Uncle Jim. I mean, he would yell at you and then he'd hug you. It was amazing. So, really miss him. And like I said, we had a great time growing up. We really loved going to Nanny and Papa's house, and Uncle Jim was always a big part of that because we would see him pretty much every day. He'd come by. I mean, except for maybe Sundays when we went to different churches. I mean, we saw him every day, you know, and Kyle, and we just had a great time. So, Aunt Kay, we're glad you're feeling better. I know your heart aches right now. Just know that we love you, and we're here for you. Addie, Allie, Anna Claire, and James, I know your hearts ache too. Your papa was a great man, and he loved you guys very much. Just don't ever forget that. So just give your mom and dad just a big hug, and just tell them you love them every day. Kyle, you were always more of a brother to me than a cousin. And I feel your loss. I feel your pain. And I wish I could just give you one of Uncle Jim's big bear hugs right now. Just know that we love you. And we wish we could just be with you guys right now through all this. And hopefully we can in the near future. So I'm here for you. You got my number. I've got yours. Let's just keep in touch and just love you, man. Uncle Jim, we miss you. Would have loved to have seen Nanny and Papa's face when they welcomed you home. And one day, we will see you again.